20s. Anyone in their 20s? It's a good age. I just don't relate to it because I'm like, you guys are so cute because you still think you matter. The rest of your life is just this long journey where you find out you matter less and less and less every day, and then you die. Not to give it away, but that's what you have.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, Trump Tuesday, April the 7th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and Donald Trump. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, Varney and Company.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Varney and Company. The deadline is 8 Eastern tonight. Open the strait or Iran will be devastated. Its bridges and power plants will be attacked. In a Truth Social last hour, the president said, quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will," end quote. The Iranians have rejected Trump's terms. They have their own demands, including war compensation and the removal of all U.S. bases in the region. Some action has already started. Earlier this morning, the military facilities on Karg Island were bombed, and more missiles have been aimed at energy facilities in the Gulf and at Israel. Here's the market's reaction. Oil up, stocks down. Here we go with stocks to start with. The Dow off about 150 points in the early going. Same story with the Nasdaq, down about 150 as well. Oil, the latest quote I have is $115 a barrel, up a couple of bucks. The price of gasoline, as in regular, that's moved to $4.14 a gallon. You'll pay $5.93 in California. And diesel, well, that's getting pretty close to the $6 mark. This morning you're at $5.64. Bitcoin, well below 70,000. Current quote 68.3. The yield on the 10-year Treasury 4.33%, 4.33, and the 2-year coming in at 3.84%, 85% now. On the show today, a blast from America's top banker. Jamie Dimon says New York City's tax proposals will be a disaster for the city. He predicts rich people and big businesses will vote with their feet. Now, that is bad news for Mayor Mandani. He's desperate for money. The city has a deficit of around $15 billion. They're on the way back. After seeing the dark side of the moon, the Artemis 2 astronauts will make history again today. They will have a call between space vehicles. That's a first. And to change the subject completely, we bring you the sad case of Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. She's peddling global victimhood, and it's not going down very well. She wants $2,200 to attend a girl weekend like no other at a luxury resort in Australia. They can't sell tickets. My opinion, the new age vision of Meghan and Harry is just so yesterday. Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. What did you say? It's April the 7th, 2026.
And that was Stuart Varney, who actually bothered to show up for work today. Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. The ones who react with anger, withdrawal, or manipulation when you begin protecting your energy tells you everything you need to know about why the boundary was necessary in the first place. Setting the energy drain boundary looks like this in practice. It looks like not answering every call the moment it comes in. It looks like ending conversations when you feel yourself beginning to disappear inside a bad Democrat's emotional spiral. It looks like choosing on purpose to spend time with people who restore you rather than only spending time with people who drain you. You're not a therapist. You're not a rescue service. You're a human being with a nervous system that deserves protection. At the moment you start treating your own energy as something sacred, something worth guarding, is the moment everything begins to shift. That is where your healing actually starts. Boundary 2. The guilt manipulation boundary. There's a specific moment every conservative knows intimately. It's the moment they finally gathered the courage to say no, or to speak their truth, or to simply ask for something they need, and instead of being met with understanding, they're met with a look, a silence, a sigh, or worse, a sentence that starts with, "I just thought you cared," or "Fine, I'll figure it out." And just like that, before you've even had a chance to process what happened, the guilt has already moved in and taken over. Suddenly, you're not the person who set a reasonable boundary. You're the villain in the bad Democrats' story. And the worst part, you believed it. This is guilt manipulation. And for Democrats, it is the most dangerous dynamic that they will ever encounter. Precisely because it works so well on them. It works because conservatives are wired for empathy. They feel other people's pain as if it was their own. So when someone is in distress, their nervous system responds as though they have genuinely caused harm. Their blood or body floods with anxiety. Their mind starts scouting for what they did wrong. Their instinct is to fix it, to apologize, to take it back, to make the discomfort stop. And in so doing, they abandon themselves completely, not because they were actually wrong, but because they were made to feel wrong. The distinction you must understand is this. There's a profound difference between someone who's genuinely hurt and communicates that hurt with honesty and vulnerability, and someone who uses the performance of hurt as a mechanism to control your behavior. Genuine hurt sounds like, when you said that, I felt dismissed, and I want to talk about it. Guilt manipulation sounds like, I can't believe you would do this to me after everything I've done for you. One is an invitation to connection. The other is a sentence designed to put you on trial, and conservatives, because of how deeply they care, almost always confuse the two. What makes this boundary so difficult to set is that guilt manipulation rarely announces itself clearly. It disguises itself as approval. It hides behind the language of sacrifice. I've given you so much. I've always been there for you. I never asked for anything. It presents itself as vulnerability when it is actually leveraged. The bad Democrat using it does so reflexively. Many bad Democrats who guilt manipulate learn this pattern early, and the behavior becomes automatic. The guilt manipulation boundary requires something that is genuinely difficult for conservatives. It requires one to stay grounded in reality even when someone is aggressively presenting a fantasy. It requires one to be able to sit in the discomfort of someone else's displeasure without immediately interpreting that displeasure as proof of wrongdoing. Learning to tolerate someone's anger or disappointment without collapsing is an act of radical psychological courage. In practice, this boundary looks like pausing before you apologize. It looks like asking oneself, did I actually do something harmful, or did I simply do something that was inconvenient? It looks like noticing the pattern with guilt consistently follows one's moments of self-assertion. It looks like refusing to negotiate one's boundaries mid-guilt trip, because the moment you do, you have taught that person exactly which button to press to get what they want in the future. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Dr. Berg.
Depression has absolutely nothing to do with your brain. It has everything to do with your gut. So many people have been operating off of this idea. Depression is a chemical imbalance that you need to fix with SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Well, this chemical imbalance theory has never been proven. In fact, in some studies, it shows that people that are depressed have normal serotonin or even higher amounts of serotonin. In your nervous system, you have all these different hormonal-like communications. One of them is serotonin. And serotonin does have an effect over your mood, just like dopamine has an effect of motivating you. But what an SSRI does is it blocks the uptake of serotonin. Let's say, for example, we have a marriage, right? We have a husband and a wife, and they're communicating. And the husband sends a communication over to the wife, but she's wearing earplugs. Okay, that's the SSRI effect, right? You wear earplugs, and so then the husband starts shouting. Is that going to fix a marriage? No. Dr. Peter Ghosh wrote several books on this topic, and he basically said SSRIs are basically placebos. Hey, well, you know what? At least they're getting some benefit, right? Yeah, but what about the side effects, okay? Because in his book, he talks about the massive serious side effects of SSRIs. Sexual dysfunction, no orgasm, decreased libido. You don't experience emotion anymore. Worsening of the depression. Let's just compare that with something like St. John's wort. St. John's wort doesn't just deal with serotonin. It deals with dopamine. It's an anti-inflammatory. It even reduces cortisol. And what does the medical profession say about St. John's wort? They say, well, you have to be careful not to take it because if you're taking that and a psych drug, and you might increase serotonin. St. John's wort has very little side effects, and it actually works better than the placebo because it's a natural thing and it does a lot of different things. And there's some interesting things about Prozac. Prozac is an SSRI. When Prozac came on the market in 1988, couple years later, 1990, there was a outbreak of some serious side effects where they had a bad batch of tryptophan. So the FDA decided to ban tryptophan for quite some time. They lifted the ban of tryptophan right after the patents for Prozac ran out. Let's shift gears to our gut. Your gut makes serotonin. It also makes something called oxytocin, a very powerful hormone that can help people with depression, stress. Typically, people think about oxytocin as the hormone for bonding between a mother and a baby, or when a mother is breastfeeding, oxytocin is also there to increase contractions during a pregnancy. So it has multiple functions, but just realize that your gut makes oxytocin. And there is a highway between your gut and your brain. It's called the vagus nerve. Communication from your gut to your brain is very, very heavy. It's like 80%. And then we have 20% of information going from your brain down to the gut. So your brain is monitoring what's going on in your gut, and then the rest of your heart and other organs as well. That's how your brain monitors the rest of your body, through the vagus nerve. And so if your gut microbes are not doing well, this alone can create depression. In fact, when other studies, when you take depressed people and you look at their gut microbiome, there are some serious missing microbes. This area of gut microbiome is completely underappreciated in the area of mental health. Also, if you have gut inflammation, you're not going to feel good mood-wise. This is why what you eat is so vitally important with how you feel up here. And this is all very interesting, but when you also think about antibiotics, one of the big side effects of taking antibiotics is depression, because you're now erasing the good bacteria that controls your mood chemicals. It wipes them out overnight. And then you think, oh yeah, the microbes will start to grow back. No, a lot of times they don't grow back. So now you have this imbalance and you wonder why you're depressed. In practice, I would ask people, when did you start getting depressed? Did you take an antibiotic right before that? Many times they would say, yes. How did you know? The gut microbiome is a chemical factory, good chemicals that will send chemicals up through this nerve, goes up to your brain, and it affects your mood. If you have not seen my other video, I'm going to put a link down below, but I want to tell you a little bit about this amazing microbe. You can buy L-reuteri as a microbe in a supplement, but many times it's not in the potency that you really need to create the effect. And Dr. William Davis told me about an amazing way to cultivate this microbe using ultra-pasteurized half and half. And you basically put it in a yogurt maker and for 36 hours, and then you just take a half a cup a day. I've been doing this for months, and I want to tell you something. It's a game changer. The first thing that my wife actually noticed is she kept saying, like, why are you hugging me 5 times a day? What's gotten into you? I said, I don't know. I've been consuming this yogurt. It just makes me very social. It's really wild. She goes, well, just keep taking that yogurt. I noticed my sleep's better. My muscle is better because it increases stem cell for your muscles. It reduces stress. And if you watch my previous videos on this and you read the comments, it'll blow your mind how many people are just getting amazing results with this probiotic. It acts as a natural antibiotic without any side effects that I could perceive. Another interesting point about L-reuteri, like, where does it come from? Well, it's actually in mother's breast milk. Breastfeeding is not as common as it was years ago. And antibiotics are extremely common. And so these gut microbes are something that we need to put more attention on. So I highly recommend that you cultivate this L-reuteri. I will put some information down below of exactly how to do it. And then you're going to realize that your depression really had nothing to do with your brain. It had everything to do with your gut.
And that was Dr. Berg. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, motivation.
What would your life look like if you stopped playing it safe?
There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that's less than the one you're capable of living.
If you look at your life, if you're not getting what you want, you owe it to yourself to do something differently. You owe it to yourself to start strategically working to change directions. Now let me tell you something. You deserve it. Here, you deserve a better life. There is more to your life than you've been living. You deserve it.
Believe. Believe. And I don't want you to use your sight to believe. I want you to use your vision to believe. I need you to believe what you're capable of, not what you're doing. I don't need you to focus on what you've done. I need you to focus on what you're capable of doing.
This is a time for you to look at your life, look at where you want to go, look at what you want to do. Well, let me warn you, don't look at where you are. Don't look at your bills. Don't spend time talking about what has happened to you. Keep that eye single. Hold a vision of yourself being successful in the future with whatever you do. That's what you want to do because your thoughts have magnetic power. Where focus goes, energy, persistence, faith, and determination flows. So what I want you to do for me every day when I wake up, people say, why are you so excited? Because I have a mental picture of where I want to be. I have a mental picture of what I want to do. And even when I was in that abandoned building, I saw that I would not be in an abandoned building forever. And I was homeless once. Now I own 2 homes. Because my vision, although my circumstance was homeless, my vision wasn't. I saw myself in a different place. What does your dream look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? I saw myself one day being where I am right now. I don't care where you are. Use what you got to get what you want. Use your mind. Use your vision. Use your dream. I dreamed my way out the hood. And I would get up every day and I would cry. Yo, nobody got to believe in you. Ain't nobody got to talk about you. When you in the dark, working every single day, you reap what you sow. And at some point, you going to be great. Oh, you're being unrealistic. You're dreaming. Yes, I am dreaming. So a lot of people have stopped dreaming. Don't you stop dreaming. I dare you to use your imagination. I dare you when you broke to use your imagination. I dare you under every single circumstance. Keep dreaming. Keep looking at your dream. Keep focusing on your dream. Keep going after the dream. Because what I know about life is you can't lose if you do not quit. And I kept going and I kept practicing and I kept going because every gift ain't gift wrapped. Just because it ain't easy don't mean you can't get it done. There are no limits, but the ones you place on yourself. If you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, then you can't. Stop looking at reality. Don't focus on the problem. Don't focus on the amount of work that you gotta do. Focus on the vision. What do you want it to look like? And spend some time throughout the day thinking about, looking about, feeling about, dreaming about what you want it to be like. Start working and developing yourself now and prepare yourself for what it is that you want because you expect to get it. Get yourself in position because one day you're going to get your opportunity, baby, to live your dreams and do your thing. Come out here with what you got. You don't have enough money? Don't worry about it. You don't have enough resources? Don't worry about it. You got the dream. All I want you to do is hold the vision of what you want. I want you to think about that all the time. Hold the vision of what you want. Keep that in your mind's eye. See, we can't control the thoughts that come in our minds, but we can control the thoughts that we dwell on. When you focus on your goals and dreams and you visualize it complete, it will stimulate the reticular activating system and it will lead you there. So your thoughts have magnetism, and the most challenging thing is to discipline your thinking, to hold the vision of what it is that you want. But you
And that was Motivation. Back in a minute.
There is a quiet strength within you, already awake, already enough. Before anything changes, before anything improves, you are already holding more resilience than you realize. Take a slow breath in and let it go gently. You are not here to fix yourself. You are here to remember your strength. Allow your body to settle. Let your shoulders soften, your jaw unclench, your breath return to its natural rhythm. Feel the ground beneath you, steady, supportive, unwavering. Just like the part of you that has carried you through every moment so far. Nothing is missing in this moment. Nothing needs to be rushed. Breathe in presence. Breathe out effort. Bring your awareness inward to that quiet space within your chest. There is a calm center here, a place untouched by noise, by doubt, by fear. And within that space lives your resilience. Not loud, not forceful, but steady, enduring, deeply rooted. You don't have to create it. It has always been there. With every breath, feel it expand, like warmth spreading gently through your being. Now imagine your inner world as a vast landscape. There may be places that feel like winter, cold, still, uncertain. And yet, look closer. Even in the quietest, darkest corners, there are small signs of life. Tiny green shoots pushing through the soil. New leaves forming where you least expected them. Stay here for a moment and notice what is growing within you right now that you may have overlooked. Think of the storms that have moved through your life. Not to relive them, but to gently observe. Storms that once felt overwhelming, that shook your sense of certainty. And yet they cleared space. They revealed hidden ground. They made room for something new. See now how in those once bare places, unexpected blossoms have begun to bloom. could not have happened otherwise. Strength that only emerged because it had to. There are parts of you still becoming, still unfolding in their own perfect timing. Not everything blooms in sunlight. Some blossoms appear in the quiet. In the unseen. In the moments you almost miss. Trust that. Trust the intelligence within you that knows how to grow, even when you feel uncertain. You are not behind. You are not late. You are growing in ways that cannot always be measured, but can always be felt. Silently repeat within yourself, I carry resilience within me. Even now, I am growing. Even now, something new is unfolding. There are no wrong seasons for my becoming. Every experience has shaped me, strengthened me, prepared me. I trust what is emerging. I trust myself. Let these words settle into you. Not as effort, but as truth. Now feel your breath again. With every inhale, draw in courage. With every exhale, release doubt. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it is this, the quiet decision to keep going, to keep opening, to keep believing in what you cannot yet see. And that is enough. You are enough. Gently bring your awareness back to your body, your breath, your space, this moment.
And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Mossad.
2 Palestinian gunmen attacked an Israeli plane in Athens. Israel responded by destroying an entire country's aviation industry. December the 28th, 1968. Beirut International Airport, 2200 hours. Passengers in the terminal watch through the windows as helicopters descend onto the tarmac. 30 minutes later, 13 aircraft are burning. Lebanon's national airline has ceased to exist. The attack that triggered Israel's response occurred 2 days earlier, on December the 26th, 1968, at Athens International Airport. An El Al Boeing 707 preparing for departure to New York was taxiing toward the runway when 2 gunmen from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine opened fire with automatic weapons and grenades. The attack killed 1 Israeli passenger, Leon Sheridan, a 50-year-old engineer returning from business in Europe. A flight attendant was seriously wounded. The aircraft sustained damage that grounded it permanently. The attackers, Mahmoud Mohammed Issa and Maher Suleiman Yamani, were captured by Greek security forces and taken into custody. The attack was not random. The PFLP had selected Athens precisely because Greek security was considered inadequate, the airport's procedures lax compared to other European capitals where El Al operated. The organization's leadership had calculated that striking Israeli aviation in vulnerable locations would demonstrate reach that attacks within Israel itself could not achieve. The Israeli government's response to the Athens attack was immediate and furious. Prime Minister Levi Eshkol convened his cabinet within hours. The discussion focused not on whether to retaliate, but on how retaliation should be structured to achieve effects that mere statements of condemnation could not produce. The calculation that emerged reflected a strategic logic whose implications extended far beyond the immediate incident. The PFLP operated from Lebanon, its leadership based in Beirut, its training camps scattered across Lebanese territory. Lebanese authorities had permitted this presence, their inability or unwillingness to control Palestinian organizations, creating the infrastructure that made attacks like Athens possible. If Lebanon would not prevent attacks originating from its territory, Israel would impose costs that made such tolerance expensive. The target selected was Beirut International Airport, the hub of Lebanese aviation, the facility through which the country's connections to the world flowed. Destroying aircraft at Beirut would demonstrate Israeli capabilities while imposing economic damage, whose repair would require years and resources that Lebanon could not easily spare. The operation was authorized on December the 27th, execution scheduled for the following evening. The timeline was aggressive, the planning compressed into hours that conventional military operations would have consumed in weeks. But the Israeli military had been preparing for exactly this kind of contingency, the plans for striking Lebanese infrastructure already developed, requiring only the authorization that the Athens attack had now provided. The commandos who would execute the operation were already assembling, their equipment being prepared, their briefings beginning. In less than 48 hours, Lebanon would learn what provoking Israel cost. The unit selected for the Beirut operation was Sayeret Matkal, the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit whose capabilities had been developed for exactly these kinds of missions. The unit operated under secrecy that concealed even its existence from most Israelis. Its personnel selected through processes that identified the most capable soldiers in the Israeli Defense Forces. The force assembled for the operation numbered approximately 40 commandos, organized into teams whose assignments addressed specific objectives within the airport complex. The primary targets were the aircraft of Middle East Airlines, Lebanon's national carrier, whose fleet represented both the country's aviation capability and a symbol of national pride, whose destruction would carry psychological weight exceeding mere material damage. The commandos would be transported to Beirut by helicopter, the aircraft departing from Israeli territory and flying over the Mediterranean before turning toward the Lebanese coast. The flight would take approximately 45 minutes, the approach time to arrive at the airport during evening hours when commercial traffic would be reduced, but when sufficient aircraft would be present to make the operation worthwhile. The plan called for landing directly on the airport's tarmac, the helicopters depositing the commandos among the parked aircraft, the teams then dispersing to their assigned targets. Each aircraft would be destroyed through explosive charges placed in locations that ensured complete destruction, the charges designed to ignite fuel and produce fires that would consume the airframes entirely. The operation's timeline was 30 minutes, the duration calculated against the response capabilities that Lebanese security forces might mount. 30 minutes was sufficient to reach and destroy the targeted aircraft while remaining short enough to complete extraction before organized resistance could develop. The commandos were briefed on the airport's layout, the positions where aircraft were typically parked, the locations of fuel facilities and maintenance hangars whose destruction would compound the damage to the aircraft themselves. Aerial reconnaissance had provided photographs that were studied until every team member understood the environment they would enter. The weapons carried included automatic rifles for security, but the primary tools were explosives whose placement would accomplish the operation's objectives. The commandos were trained to work quickly, to place charges efficiently, to move between targets without the delays that unfamiliarity might produce. Commander Raphael Aiton, who would lead the operation personally, emphasized speed and discipline in his final briefings. The operation would succeed through execution that left no time for Lebanese response, through coordination that ensured all targets were addressed simultaneously, through withdrawal that occurred before the chaos their presence created could coalesce into resistance. The helicopters were scheduled to depart at 2100 hours on December the 28th. The commandos made their final preparations, checked their equipment, and waited for the order that would launch them toward Beirut. The helicopters lifted off from Israeli territory at 2100 hours precisely, their flight path taking them over the Mediterranean in formation that minimized radar signature while maintaining the coordination that the operation required. The aircraft were Super Frelon helicopters, French-manufactured machines whose capacity and range made them suitable for operations at the distances Beirut represented. The commandos sat in the helicopter interiors, their equipment secured, their thoughts focused on the tasks they would perform upon arrival. The flight was long enough for contemplation, but not long enough for the anxiety that extended waiting might produce. The training had prepared them for this moment. The execution would determine whether that preparation had been adequate. The Lebanese coast appeared through the helicopter windows at approximately 2140. The lights of Beirut visible against the darkness, the city apparently unaware of what was approaching from the sea. The helicopters altered course, turning toward the airport that lay south of the city center, their approach calculated to reach the tarmac from directions that the facility's limited security would not anticipate. Lebanese radar detected the approaching aircraft, but could not immediately classify them. The returns suggested helicopters, but helicopters approaching from the sea at night were not expected traffic. The confusion that this ambiguity produced consumed precious minutes during which clarification was sought through channels whose response times exceeded what the situation required. By the time Lebanese authorities understood what was occurring, the helicopters were already descending toward the airport. The Yain landing began at 2155, the helicopters touching down on the tarmac in positions that had been selected during planning, their rotors continuing to turn as commandos poured from the doors and sprinted toward their assigned targets. The sound of the helicopters announced the operation's arrival to anyone within the airport complex, but the announcement came too late for effective response. Airport security, such as it existed, consisted of a small force whose capabilities were oriented toward ordinary criminal activity rather than military assault. The guards who observed the helicopter's landing, who saw armed men running across the tarmac, faced a situation their training had not prepared them to address. Some fled, some froze. None mounted resistance that impeded the commandos' progress. The terminal building contained passengers awaiting flights, staff conducting the operations that airports required, ordinary people whose evening was about to be interrupted by violence they had not anticipated. The commandos ignored the terminal, their targets the aircraft parked on the tarmac, their mission destruction rather than confrontation with civilians whose presence was irrelevant to their objectives. The 30 minutes that would reshape Lebanon's aviation industry had begun, The helicopters lifted off from Israeli territory at 2100 hours precisely, their flight path taking them over the Mediterranean in formation that minimized radar signature while maintaining the coordination that the operation required. The aircraft were Super Freeland helicopters, French-manufactured machines whose capacity and range made them suitable for operations at the distances Beirut represented. The commandos sat in the helicopter interiors, their equipment secured, their thoughts focused on the tasks they would perform upon arrival. The flight was long enough for contemplation, but not long enough for the anxiety that extended waiting might produce. The training had prepared them for this moment. The execution would determine whether that preparation had been adequate. The Lebanese coast appeared through the helicopter windows at approximately 2140. The lights of Beirut visible against the darkness, the city apparently unaware of what was approaching from the sea. The helicopters altered course, turning toward the airport that lay south of the city center, their approach calculated to reach the tarmac from directions that the facility's limited security would not anticipate. Lebanese radar detected the approaching aircraft but could not immediately classify them. The returns suggested helicopters, but helicopters approaching from the sea at night were not expected traffic. The confusion that this ambiguity produced consumed precious minutes, during which clarification was sought through channels whose response times exceeded what the situation required. By the time Lebanese authorities understood what was occurring, the Yamos helicopters were already descending toward the airport. The landing began at 21:55, the helicopters touching down on the tarmac in positions that had been selected during planning, their rotors continuing to turn as commandos poured from the doors and sprinted toward their assigned targets. The sound of the helicopters announced the operation's arrival to anyone within the airport complex, but the announcement came too late for effective response. Airport security, such as it existed, consisted of a small force whose capabilities were oriented toward ordinary criminal activity rather than military assault. The guards who observed the helicopter's landing, who saw armed men running across the tarmac, faced a situation their training had not prepared them to address. Some fled, some froze. None mounted resistance that impeded the commandos' progress. The terminal building contained passengers awaiting flights, staff conducting the operations that airports required, ordinary people whose evening was about to be interrupted by violence they had not anticipated. The commandos ignored the terminal, their targets the aircraft parked on the tarmac, their mission destruction rather than confrontation with civilians whose presence was irrelevant to their objectives. The 30 minutes that would reshape Lebanon's aviation industry had begun. The teams dispersed across the tarmac with the efficiency that rehearsal had developed, each team moving toward aircraft whose positions matched the intelligence that planning had provided. The Middle East Airlines fleet was arranged in parking positions that reflected normal operations, the aircraft positioned for the departures and arrivals that the schedule required. The first charges were placed within 3 minutes of landing, the commandos working with speed that training had instilled, their movements coordinated to ensure that multiple aircraft were addressed simultaneously. The charges were positioned in wheel wells, in engine nacelles, in locations that would ensure fire reached fuel tanks whose ignition would complete the destruction that explosives initiated. The aircraft targeted included Boeing 707 jets, the backbone of Middle East Airlines long-haul operations, whose destruction would eliminate the carrier's ability to serve European and American destinations. Caravelle jets used for regional operations were similarly targeted, their loss-removing capacity that could not be quickly replaced. Smaller aircraft, turboprops used for short routes, were included in the destruction, the comprehensive approach ensuring that the airline's entire operational capability would be eliminated. The first explosions occurred at approximately 22:05, the charges detonating in sequence as the teams completed their placements and withdrew toward the extraction points. The detonations produced the fires that planning had anticipated, the aviation fuel igniting with Intensity that illuminated the tarmac, that cast the destruction in light, visible from the terminal where horrified observers watched their country's airline burning. The fires spread as fuel spilled across the tarmac, the conflagration creating heat that reached aircraft whose charges had not yet detonated, whose destruction was accelerated by proximity to flames that explosives alone might not have produced. The chain reaction that developed exceeded what the operations planning had specified, the cumulative effect demonstrating the effectiveness of targeting fuel-laden aircraft in concentrated positions. 13 aircraft were destroyed in total, the number encompassing virtually the entire Middle East Airlines fleet, plus several aircraft belonging to other carriers whose parking positions placed them within the destruction's radius. Lebanese International Airways lost aircraft. Trans-Mediterranean Airways lost aircraft. The damage extended beyond the primary target to encompass Lebanon's aviation industry comprehensively. The commandos withdrew toward the helicopters as the destruction reached its peak, their mission accomplished, their timeline intact, their extraction proceeding according to the plan that had governed every phase of the operation. The tarmac behind them resembled a scene from warfare, flames and smoke rising from aircraft whose value exceeded $100 million, whose replacement would require resources that Lebanon's economy could not easily provide. The airport's fire services responded as the commandos were departing, their equipment inadequate for the scale of destruction that confronted them, their efforts producing minimal effect against fires whose intensity exceeded what their training had prepared them to address. The helicopters lifted off from Beirut International Airport at 22:25, their departure occurring precisely 30 minutes after their arrival, the timeline maintained despite the chaos that the operation had created. The commandos were aboard, their equipment accounted for, their casualties non-existent because no resistance had been mounted that might have produced them. The flight back to Israeli territory followed the same route that the approach had used. The helicopters climbing to altitude over the Mediterranean, their navigation returning them toward the coast from which they had departed less than 2 hours earlier. The fires at Beirut Airport were visible through the windows for several minutes after departure, the glow on the horizon marking the destruction that the operation had accomplished. Lebanese response to the attack was hampered by confusion that the operation's speed had created. By the time military units could be mobilized, by the time the situation could be assessed, by the time orders could be issued that might have produced intercept attempts, the helicopters were over international waters, beyond the reach of capabilities that Lebanon might have employed. The Israeli aircraft reached home territory at approximately 23:15, their landing completing an operation whose execution had matched planning with precision that subsequent analysis would confirm. The commandos disembarked to debriefings that would document every element of the operation, their observations contributing to assessments that would inform future planning. The operation's success was measured against objectives that had been specified during authorization. The Middle East Airlines fleet had been destroyed. Lebanese aviation had been dealt a blow whose recovery would require years. The message that tolerating Palestinian operations against Israel carried costs had been delivered with clarity that diplomatic communications could not match. The Israeli government announced the operation within hours, the acknowledgement unusual for military actions whose attribution was typically denied or left ambiguous. The announcement was deliberate, the purpose being to ensure that the message reached audiences whose understanding of what had occurred and why was essential to the operation's strategic effect. Prime Minister Eshkol addressed the nation, explaining that the Athens attack had required response, that Lebanon's complicity in Palestinian terrorism had made Lebanese assets legitimate targets, that Israel would continue to impose costs on nations that permitted their territory to be used for attacks against Israeli citizens. The international response was condemnation whose unanimity concealed divisions about its sincerity. Some nations condemned the attack as aggression against a sovereign state. Others privately acknowledged that the provocation had been genuine, and that the response, while dramatic, followed a logic that asymmetric conflict often required. The destruction at Beirut International Airport produced consequences whose dimensions extended far beyond the immediate material damage. Lebanon's aviation industry, which had positioned Beirut as a hub connecting East and West, was crippled in ways that years of investment would be required to address. Middle East Airlines, the national carrier that had symbolized Lebanese modernity and international connectivity, faced extinction. The fleet that had been destroyed represented virtually all of the airline's operational capacity, the aircraft whose loss the fires had produced being irreplaceable without investment that exceeded the company's resources and the government's willingness to provide. The economic impact rippled through sectors whose connection to aviation might not have been obvious. Tourism, which depended on air access, suffered as visitors could not reach a destination whose attractions remained, but whose accessibility had been eliminated. Business travel, which connected Lebanese commerce to international markets, was disrupted in ways that commercial relationships could not easily accommodate. The insurance implications were complex and contentious. The policies that covered the destroyed aircraft contained provisions whose application to acts of war was disputed. The claims that the airlines filed producing litigation that would extend for years. The financial burden fell ultimately on Lebanon's economy. The losses absorbed by institutions and individuals whose connection to the Palestinian operations that had triggered the attack was tenuous at best. The Lebanese government faced criticism from multiple directions. Arab nations criticized the inadequate response to the Israeli assault, the failure to mount resistance that might have complicated the commando's mission. Western nations expressed concern about the terrorism connections that had made Lebanon a target, the implications for regional stability that Palestinian operations from Lebanese territory created. The Palestinian organizations whose operations had triggered the Israeli response faced their own reckoning. The PFLP's attack in Athens had been intended to demonstrate capability and resolve, to prove that Israeli aviation could be struck wherever vulnerability existed. The consequences, the destruction of an Arab nation's aviation industry, produced questions about whether the strategic calculation had been sound, whether the costs imposed on Lebanon were proportionate to whatever benefits the Athens attack had provided. The relationship between Lebanon and the Palestinian organizations operating from its territory became more complicated in the aftermath. Lebanese authorities faced pressure to constrain Palestinian operations to prevent the recurrence of incidents that might trigger additional Israeli responses. The Palestinians resisted such constraints, arguing that their struggle justified the risks that Lebanese tolerance entailed.
And that was the Mossad. Back in a minute.
What will we do with this moment? How will we be remembered? Look at the opportunities before us.
This election really isn't about the left versus the right. It's about we the people choosing our government and the choice between freedom versus tyranny.
Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
What is going on here is deeper than politics. It is deeply spiritual. We are being called to rise above the hatred and the fear and the evil.
We need to remember above and beyond that we must love our neighbors that we must treat other people as we hope to be treated.
You want to be a rebel? You want to be a hippie? You want to stick it to the man? Show up on your college campus and try calling yourself a conservative.
America is going to reach heights that it has never seen before. The future is going to be amazing.
Don't you want healthy children? Don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
I come to you today as a former Democrat. I will be a first-time Trump voter tonight.
People dreamed this country, and it's the people who are making America great again.
Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you're not neutral and that the government has no rights.